Not too long ago, I visited Montreal, Quebec, and one of the things I noticed about the city was how quintessentially urban it felt. I'm here in Toronto, and I'm starting to notice a trend. Canadians just do urbanism better than Americans.
Hey y'all, and welcome back to A Sense of Travel. I'm Michael, and I'm on a mission on this channel to document the 5 senses of as many cities, countries, and natural landmarks around the world as I possibly can, so that I can bring you into the experience immersively. Now today, we're in Canada's largest city and the most multicultural city on the planet, Toronto. So I am stoked to bring you guys on this adventure with me and immerse you in the city through all 5 senses. So let's dive in.
As an American, I'm never quite sure what to expect when visiting our neighbor to the north, Canada. We share a lot of history, culture, and food with much of Canada, and quite often, Canadians and Americans are indistinguishable. When it comes to Canada's largest city, Toronto, these similarities may lead the average person to think it's probably just another Chicago, or vice versa. The thing is, yes and no. Toronto and Chicago are both Great Lakes cities. Both have remarkable architecture, gorgeous vistas, diverse food, and sharp winters. But there's a lot more to both of these places than meets the eye. With over 2.8 million people in the city limits and over 6.7 million people in the Greater Toronto Area, Toronto is North America's 4th largest city, behind only New York, Mexico City, and LA. A city this size, in the heart of Ontario, is bound to be the epicenter of Canadian culture and identity. And today, I invite you to experience it with me through all 5 senses. Today, we'll experience the senses of Toronto's vibrant, multicultural downtown and Old Town, feel the bliss of the Scarborough Bluffs and Toronto Islands, taste our way through the staples in Toronto's culinary palette, and wrap it up with a little excursion to one of the world's most famous waterfalls. So, let's dive in. Before we land on the ground in Toronto's behemoth of a downtown, we're actually going to start from the air above, specifically from 1,815 feet. The most glaringly prominent structure in Toronto's sea of skyscrapers, cranes, and neighborhoods happens to be the tallest freestanding structure in the Western Hemisphere, and the 10th tallest in the world, the CN Tower. At 1,815 feet tall, or roughly 553 meters, the needle-like structure pierces the sky above Toronto and can be seen from practically anywhere downtown, especially along the waterfront. A smooth and fast glass elevator ride up leads to a remarkable panorama of the bustling city and the soothing Lake Ontario.
So, atop the CN Tower, you get a panoramic view of Toronto and the entire metro area. And as you might expect, it's pretty spectacular to see the fabric of the city. On 3 sides of the tower, you've got the entire urban fabric, you've got skyscrapers literally everywhere, and it's a sea of glass and steel, incredibly modern. And then on the other side, of course, you have the beautifully blue and super hazy Lake Ontario. And the atmosphere is loud, as you can probably tell. So you're going to hear a lot of talking and kids screaming and people getting super nervous at how high up they are. The Weeknd playing above, Canadian artist, so it makes sense. And it smells super polished and clean. This is a very modern structure. And it's a little cool up here. So there you have it. Those are the 5 senses you'll experience at the top of CN Tower if you're not afraid of heights. Otherwise, you might just be experiencing nausea.
Off in the hazy blue distance are high-rise skylines of Toronto's suburbs, and even the Canadian cities of Hamilton and Mississauga.
Another cool thing that you might not see the top of the CN Tower if you're ever here, but we were lucky enough to see the spider jets practicing their formations up in the sky. And it is kind of surreal, first off, to see the fighter jets, and they're really cool, but to be as high up as they are, to hear that sonic boom coming through the air, through the tower, and to be almost on level, it's pretty cool.
Back on the ground, Toronto's modern patchwork, both figuratively and literally, comes to life. It's here that you can really appreciate the frequent comparison of Toronto and Chicago. Both cities are gorgeous, perched upon one of the ocean-like Great Lakes, have stunning architecture, hundreds of skyscrapers, and a multicultural feeling. While Toronto shares a lot more in common with the United States than other Canadian metros like Montreal on the surface level, there are, however, a few differences. The urbanism here is far superior to that of most US cities, save for New York, Philly, and Chicago, and, in my opinion, outpaces cities like Boston, San Francisco, and Washington, D.C. The city core is dense and tall, is loaded with fully activated storefronts, has tram lines, a strong subway system, frequent buses, and great bike infrastructure, all while being incredibly clean.
At the time of this recording, it's a sprightly September morning. Nice. But it's breezy, it's cool. The air isn't super humid or anything, so it's just a nice breeze. Toronto's urban canyons are really, really interesting, right? Like, you have this beautiful art on the sides of the buildings, but it's also just such an eclectic blend of stuff, right? Like, you have restaurants and shops that could very easily fit in all over the world. And I was looking at it, Toronto is actually the most diverse major city on the planet. I think it's something around 50% of people who live in Toronto weren't born in Canada.
Signage, as with most of the world outside the US, uses the metric system for distance and speed. Often, these signs include French alongside English, although it's not quite as common here as in Quebec. To place yourself imaginatively into the heart of downtown Toronto, imagine fresh, cool, and slightly humid air, joined by scents of concrete, brick, a hint of maple, stone, and even wafts of bacon. You'll notice the sounds of the Toronto subway rumbling underground beneath the metal grates on the sidewalks, alongside the sounds of cars echoing in the urban canyons, the hum of machines keeping the skyscrapers running, and the bustling sounds of crowds of shoppers, tourists, and locals alike. Downtown neighborhoods are each incredibly distinctive. Toronto is very much a city of neighborhoods, and the international enclaves can make you feel like you're stepping into a new country block by block. Toronto's Chinatown, for example, feels like a world away from the polish and commercial shine of the arenas and attractions near the CN Tower. The large, broad streets are drenched in Chinese signage, art, street-side markets, and restaurants, and seem to go on forever. From the low, grungy, and colorful brick buildings, you'll notice wafts of cooking Chinese foods joining the sounds of bustling crowds of shoppers. Just northwest of Chinatown is Kensington Market, a neighborhood that feels like the epicenter of Toronto's bohemian, artistic, beatnik culture, with a lot of what appears to be Caribbean influence, particularly by way of the food. Low brick buildings sit behind wooden market stands, joining colorful storefronts and brightly painted benches, and lots of street art and graffiti. Remarkably lived in, Kensington Market has a true urban neighborhood feel.
Toronto is definitely been full of surprises, and I think one of my favorite ones thus far has been the Kensington Market. And it's really cool because it feels like the kind of market you would see across the Atlantic, but not necessarily in Europe. It's like incredibly multicultural, and all of the different stands and shops on the side, they don't look like polished market stands. They look like wooden kind of makeshift stands and buildings, and
it's just really cool. And it feels grungy and dirty and lived in, and I think this is what cities need more of.
I'm not certain about this, but it seems as if this would be the perfect place for university students because right on the edge, you'll find the internationally acclaimed University of Toronto, whose stately, neo-Gothic stone campus looks as if it could exist alongside Cambridge or Oxford themselves. Back in the heart of downtown, you'll find that Toronto doesn't just evoke the sensations one might find in Chicago. New York City's younger twin can be found in Dundas Square, a plaza that, in essence, is Toronto's answer to Times Square. Huge billboards of neon displays and LED lights, big box brand shops, and the sounds of jazz, crowds of shoppers, and bumping music create a stimulating atmosphere that, like Times Square, makes you feel as if you're in the heart of it all.
So Old Town Toronto is a little different than other old towns around the world. It's not super old, but it is still really cool. You've got a lot of these old brick buildings, street side diners and cafes and bakeries, cool little shops. There's this really cool Flatiron building, which I really appreciate. And then of course surrounding the old brick Old Town buildings, you just have these really eclectic skyscrapers. And that's something I've been so impressed by in Toronto, is how unique the skyscrapers are here. They're not just big, tall, slender boxes. They have innovative character and design, and it's really cool. But you know, this neighborhood is relaxing. It feels like a big market. Obviously, you know, cars are making up a lot of the soundscape over here, but so are people, and so are families, and the clatter of street dining, wafts from the food that are coming out of the diners and bakeries, and we have the sounds of bells chiming in the distance. It's just a really quintessentially fun urban feel.
If I could sum up my experience in Toronto in just a couple of words, it may go along the lines of multicultural, localized, and warm-hearted. The St. Lawrence Market really encapsulates this summation of Toronto. The humongous brick warehouse of a building is packed with shops and stands of nearly anything you can imagine, from Ukrainian pierogies to Nepali clothes to Canadian maple syrup to Portuguese rice pudding. The best way I can capture the ambience is to compare it to a larger scale Pike Place market in Seattle or a larger Reading market in Philadelphia. Wafts of foods from around the world and a bit of fresh seafood fill the warm air, which reflects the echoing sounds of hundreds of shoppers. One of my favorite things about Toronto is the density of its downtown. This density means that more space surrounding the urban center can remain untouched as a natural refuge, and in Toronto's case, the space surrounding the city core is absolutely breathtaking. A day spent on Lake Ontario is the epitome of bliss. About 8 miles from downtown, the Scarborough Bluffs look like something you might see in a fantasy adventure movie. Towering white stone cliffs, cut into jagged shapes from Ice Age-era glaciers, dominate the horizon, shielding the view of Toronto's urban core and creating a sense of peaceful isolation.
Toronto really is just magnificent, isn't it? I mean, being out here in Scarborough Bluffs Park, in addition to the bluffs, I'll show you some more up-close shots of those in a minute, but I mean, you feel like you're in just a wildlife refuge. And being right next to the beachfront, you know, it can feel like an actual escape. It's virtually silent, with the exception of, you know, kind of the insects and bugs and occasional birds chirping, and then just the wind breezing through all of these beautiful plants. The air smells of like fresh florals and greenery. I mean, this is really, really beautiful, and it's not really what you would expect to be this close to the heart of the city when you're walking around downtown Toronto, which feels absolutely gigantic. This is just a really nice area.
Beneath the breathtaking cliffs and lush greenery sit rocky, sandy beaches along the perfectly aqua blue Lake Ontario. Resembling the sea at its calmest, the atmosphere along Lake Ontario is, as I mentioned before, blissful.
Now, when you get right up on the water, of course, the scentscape and the sounds and the feelings change. You get a soft breeze rolling through. You hear the sounds of softly flapping lake waves. You get the sense of fresh, fishy water from Lake Ontario. You also have the sounds of speedboats out in the distance. You see kayakers out and about. It's hot, but the lake breeze really helps that out. And it's really, really peaceful and absolutely stunning.
To place yourself into a warm summer's day here, imagine scents of campfire barbecues, sand, florals, greenery, and crisp, fresh lake water. The sounds of speedboats, small crashing waves, and seabirds, or I guess lake birds, crying, cawing crows, and families enjoying a day on the beach fill the warm, humid air. The Scarborough Bluffs are easily the most beautiful lakeside scenery I've seen in North America, as of now at least. But Toronto's beaches aren't limited to less trodden upon parts of the city. Toronto's Center Island, particularly in the summertime, feels like a big festival. To get there, you have to board a ferry from downtown, taking you across the smooth harbor. From the ferry, Toronto's skyline comes into view, and it's truly a sight to behold. The CN Tower is, of course, the most prominent structure, right in the center, but the hundreds of high-rises and skyscrapers beneath it make for a skyline that rivals that of Chicago and New York City.
Toronto is a city of surprises for sure. So first off, the beaches here, and yes, Toronto has beaches, are absolutely gorgeous. They're the exact same atmosphere as most beaches I've been to, in the sense that it smells like sand, it smells like fresh water, not salt water, but there's like a festive party atmosphere out. And the weather is beautiful, you've got music, you've got people laying out. I guess the only difference is there's not really any surfing in Lake Ontario. But all of the Toronto islands are just really, really cool and have a really laid-back, fun, just kind of family festive atmosphere.
Thanks to the nearby amusement parks and boardwalks, the island and beaches are filled with the sounds of kids and families, lake birds, dogs barking, and bustling crowds.
So Toronto Island is a home to beaches, to amusement parks, and some really cool stuff, but I think the most fascinating is the Gibraltar Point, I think it's pronounced Gibraltar Point, lighthouse. So not only was this structure completed in 1808, so it predates the nation of Canada, but it apparently, at least according to the signage on the structure, is quite haunted. In terms of describing the senses you'll experience in this part of the island, don't worry, there's nothing supernatural, at least that I know of, happening here. But it is a really cool lighthouse.
To capture the tastes of Toronto is actually quite a difficult task. The multicultural nature of the city means that anything, and I mean anything, can be found in Toronto's neighborhoods. Immigration patterns throughout the city's history have led to vibrant Chinese, Caribbean, Vietnamese, and, well, just about anything else you can imagine. While I did dive into the phenomenal international food scene, for example, with a delicious chicken pho at a small Vietnamese restaurant in the north of the city, here are a few of the tastes that I feel capture the more traditional side of the Toronto experience. Pea meal bacon sandwiches. At Carousel Bakery in the St. Lawrence Market, you'll find the famous and classic pea meal bacon sandwich, a thick, soft bun filled with thick-cut pea meal Canadian bacon. To add a kick to the rich bacon taste, I ordered my sandwich with a maple mustard sauce. After the first juicy bite, it's clear why this has become such a Torontonian staple. Ketchup chips. It's genuinely incredible that Americans haven't jumped on this yet. Basically, ketchup chips are potato chips of any kind, with ketchup flavoring and seasoning. Y'all, ketchup chips are deliciously rich in flavor, and if you're ever feeling a bit adventurous in your potato chip hunt, Canada has you covered. Butter tarts. Also found at the St. Lawrence Market, although they're quite common throughout all of Ontario, are butter tarts. These thick, dense, sweet bread tarts come with a strong maple syrup, sugar, egg, and butter filling of a sticky, gooey consistency and are sickly sweet. Poutine. The waiter at Jack Astor's on Front Street said that if you're from Toronto, you've been to Jack Astor's. Whether or not that holds any water is for the locals to decide, and let me know in the comments if it's true, but what I will say is that the poutine here was truly decadent. Thin-cut, salty French fries blanketed with gravy and cool cheese curds, poutine is a classic Canadian dish that is most commonly found in Quebec, where it originated. That said, I found this to be on par with the poutine I tried in Montreal. Tim Hortons. Right up there with hockey and maple syrup is a fast food coffee house that unites Canadians both young and old. Tim Hortons.
So around this time last year, I did a video on Montreal, Quebec, and I visited Tim Hortons, which is undeniably a Canadian staple. And I got a little bit of flack on that because I understand that Tim Hortons is not quintessential coffee. But this is a fast food chain that absolutely defines the Canadian fast food landscape, and you really can't miss it if you're going to be in Canada. So let's see what they got.
In addition to a pretty good coffee, their Boston cream donut, a surprising staple, is sweet, thickly filled, and very creamy. To round out the Toronto experience, I want to touch on a place that, while not actually in Toronto, is a day trip necessity if you find yourself nearby. Niagara Falls. Y'all, Niagara Falls is unreal. The cascading water over the towering cliffsides into the Niagara River is truly mesmerizing.
So like an hour and a half outside of Toronto, on the Canadian side, by the way, because I'm convinced this is the better side, are Niagara Falls. And however big you imagine them in your head, they're bigger, and it's simply breathtaking. Again, I recommend the Canadian side of the falls because you can actually get the full breadth of the Horseshoe Falls on this side. Amazing.
Here at the falls, the air smells of fresh water and wet stone. Gusts of chilly mist fill the otherwise hot and humid air, which carries the sounds of the heavily cascading waterfalls. Toronto is the fastest growing city in North America, and it really isn't difficult to understand the allure. With its stunning architecture, incredible urbanism, cosmopolitan nature, eclectic neighborhoods, distinctive seasons, gorgeous natural vistas, and a strong sense of open-mindedness and inclusivity, Toronto has joined the ranks of Chicago, Boston, San Francisco, and Montreal as one of my favorite cities in North America. My hope is that today, by diving in with me through all 5 senses, you were able to place yourself imaginatively into the towering urban canyons of Toronto in a way that makes you feel as if you've wandered the hodgepodge streets of Kensington Market and basked in the sun on the edge of Lake Ontario alongside me. As always, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.